So a lot of folks get caught up in the heavy off-road capable truck building aspect of overlanding and sort of forget a little bit about what the whole point of all of this is. The point of overlanding, in my opinion, is to get to the destination, get to the best campsite, or in some people's opinions, it is the journey itself. I love the idea of the rung what you brung, whatever vehicle you have, Subarus, full-size trucks, vans, or whatever they have, that's what they use to go overland. As cool as 4Runners, Tacomas, and Jeeps are, they're not the only thing out there, and you don't have to own one of those to overland, and you certainly don't have to build it out with all the armor, long travel, king suspension, just to travel down a dirt road with maybe some light obstacles. Hey guys, my name is Jason, and I am not a rock crawler. I'm a bit of an overlander, and actually, in my own words, I'm more of a car camper that likes to have a little bit of a more capable vehicle. I'll occasionally do the hard trails, but this 2018 Tundra here, this build is not a rock crawler build. Before we get too far into it, let's go ahead and talk about the difference between overlanding, off-roading, and rock crawling. So overlanding can be a lot of different things, and that can range from really easy, just a dirt road, all the way up to a little bit harder of a trail, an actual rated trail. But typically the goal is not, let's hit the hardest trail we can possibly find, and let's hit the hardest obstacle we can possibly find. Most of overlanding can be achieved with a moderate four-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive vehicle. My girlfriend has a Forester. You've probably seen it in the background of some of my videos, and that could technically be an Overlander. It would actually do pretty well on a lot of trails out here, just not the higher rated stuff. Channels like Soft Roading the West, as well as Colorado Mall Crawlers, which I have been featured on a few times. Both of these channels do a really good job of showing that a moderately capable vehicle, even in its stock form, can do a lot of stuff, and it can be very capable. I have a full-size Tundra here, and while it is very capable, it does have four-wheel drive, four-wheel low, it is very large. It's very wide, and while on most trails it doesn't really matter how wide this is, I didn't really build this to be the most off-road, hardest line possible build. This right here is a comfortable overlanding vehicle, and hell, even sometimes I enjoy just a good festival or an expo where I can just pull up and hang out with friends, so it doesn't need to be a big giant rock crawler. So after that, we've got off-roading. Now, off-roading can involve a lot of the elements of overlanding. You can use this to get to a campsite, to get to a destination, and you'll definitely enjoy the journey as you go. However, most of this will involve an actual rated trail rather than a dirt road, although sometimes overlanders do hit rated trails. Now, sometimes it does lead to getting to your destination, getting to your campsite, but sometimes people will go off-roading just for the sake of off-roading, and then they may go camping, but they may actually, hop in town, grab a beer, and hit a hotel at night. Now, this requires some degree of capability on your rig. It may require some additional stuff, but we've seen from channels like Colorado Mall Crawlers, who I've personally off-roaded with several times, we see that it doesn't necessarily matter the vehicle as long as it is somewhat capable, and there are a wide variety of vehicles that you can use for this application. Now, rock crawling is actually a really interesting one because typically people either have these really, really expensive built out rigs, or they'll have absolute beaters that they bash and break while they're rock crawling. Now, this may involve camping in some aspects, but after a long day of off-roading and pushing your vehicle hard to the limits, sometimes you'll see a lot of these people trailer their off-road vehicle, their rock crawler, and then just hop in a hotel. I made this truck for pretty much camping as well as being an off-road capable truck, and I kind of looked to a truck that is a build from TAV. They did a build for skinny guy campers, and a lot of my truck, kind of the aesthetics and kind of some of the modifications, I looked to that truck as sort of inspiration, as that is much more of a camper than it is a heavy off-roader. That being said, that does bring me to today's sponsor of the video. Real Truck is a company that I've been trying to work with for a while, and I had been trying to talk to them about working together on a project where I was going to be able to maintain a great deal of height, but when shorter people rode in my car, like my mom, they could actually hop in. I had my steps before. people could still climb in, but then they were hanging down really low, and they were getting close to actually hitting rocks. This is AMP research, and essentially is an instant step down. So this is a really easy install, but if you're like me and you're just very busy, I'm right in the process of moving right now, so I just don't have the time. I went ahead and found a Real Truck authorized dealer and installer near me. It was right down the street. This was super easy. I really like this shop. These guys were really great. So if you're like me and you just want that clearance, but you still want to be able to have a step, then this is a really great option, because I am not a huge heavy rock crawler. Getting rock rails that a lot of people can't step up on is not really ideal for me. So Real Truck has a ton of truck parts. They've got toppers, they've got bed rugs, they've got lift kits, brakes, tires, wheels. There's a good chance they'll have what you need on their website. So I really love these steps because they tuck away super high up, and they're only maybe an inch off of the rocker rails right there. So you've got plenty of space to clear any rocks. You've got a great step here that's pretty low when you go down. And then as soon as you close the door, give it a few seconds, and it'll tuck back up in there. I need to get up on the roof. I can make this actually stay down. So if I close the door, put the tiniest bit of pressure, it's not gonna move. If you do wanna check that out, I'll put the link below. So thank you for Real Truck for sponsoring this video. And thanks again to Super Trucks USA for the install. I will drop a link to them below as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the categories and some of the modifications that you might need in each of these categories to really have kind of an enjoyable experience. So if you're going to be overlanding, there's not really much required here. It really depends on how hard of a trail you're doing. It's possible that you're going to be doing a split with some highway miles, maybe a dirt road. When it comes to overlanding, I like to say, let's just make it comfortable and make it as good of a camping experience as possible with a little bit of capability in there. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend, having a two-wheel drive vehicle in a lot of situations that require, four-wheel drive. But if you have all-wheel drive, or a four-wheel drive, there's probably going to be a pretty good chance that you'll be capable for overlanding. I've been doing a lot of stuff with this truck as it is right now, even with those crappy low-hanging steps, so that really knocks down that capability because I have that much less clearance with those steps hanging down. But yeah, maybe removing these steps and a lift, that might be all you need to get that ground clearance, but it's going to be different from person to person. And for me, bumper, skids, and the steps being removed are probably going to be what I need to accomplish most things, and I can reassess that in the future. Now, you don't really need a lift to do this. I've seen a lot of channels that have stock vehicles, don't have a lift, doing the overlanding thing. Van lifers out there, a lot of them don't have a crazy lift on them if they do have one at all. If you want to do the lifts and tires, by all means. If you want to get to the harder campsites, absolutely. And if you do want to add the armor, definitely do add that. I would say the most important one would be that front bumper, because that will give you the ability to mount a winch, and you can add lights on there. So if you're in more of the off-roading category, you can still get away with what you have. If you have a big full-size truck, an F-150, a Tundra like this, a Chevy, something like that, you can probably get away with that on most of the trails, but you just have to understand the shortcomings of your vehicle. Let's say you have an all-wheel drive vehicle, four-wheel drive, and it doesn't have a low gearing. So what are the limitations of this vehicle? Well, if you need to get up something that's steep while climbing and you're over an obstacle, you may not be able to make it, as you might not be able to get the low enough gearing to get traction. You also don't have a ton of ground clearance on something like this, so rock gardens are definitely not going to be your forte. Full-size truck. Now, likely going to have four-wheel drive, maybe even locking differential, probably a 4 low, and they're going to have probably pretty big engines. Well, the downside to these is that they're probably going to be wider. So you have to look at a trail and go, okay, I know the limitations of my truck. It's wide, and that way you can kind of work around that, which is actually kind of half the fun. Don't get discouraged thinking you need a $70,000 built-out Jeep Wrangler to enjoy off-roading. Maybe need a lift. It depends on the vehicle. I did a little bit of off-roading without a lift on this 2018 Tundra. not really an issue. I even had those low-hanging steps and the mud flaps and everything. So obviously the lift isn't 100% required, but it is really nice, so you can do a little bit harder of trails. Now this is where it starts getting into the armor. Bumper would be really, really nice for this. Like I said, you will have the ability to mount a winch up there. Again, not 100% necessary if you're doing a little bit lighter of trails, but once you start getting into those rock gardens and you can't see up front, it is really nice to have a front bumper. When it comes to a rock crawler, you're probably going to be kind of stuck within a few vehicles, and you're probably going to have to heavily modify that thing out unless it's an absolute beater, and in which case you're probably still going to have a lot of aftermarket parts to make that possible. A little bit more to the four-wheel drives, and you'll probably want a low range as well as a locking differential. So longer travel suspension, higher end suspension, bigger tires are probably going to be in this category. You know, I have 35s on here. You could get away with 35s on a rock crawler, but a lot of those guys are throwing on 37s, 40s, huge tires on those. So you're going to be spending a lot more money on those off-road parts. So building out your vehicle doesn't have to be a pre-prescribed formula that you have to stick to. You don't have to just go out and buy the top 3 brands of armor, the top 3 brands of lighting. That's definitely not the case, although sometimes it does appear that way on YouTube as well as Instagram. For me, the journey and the destination are the most fun parts, and hanging out with my friends out in the woods, friends and family, it's definitely something that I consider the most fun part of the kind of off-roading, getting out in the backcountry. I don't really have the desire to go out there and just intentionally bash my vehicle on the most difficult obstacle I can find. Now, obviously, I would love to build a rock crawler, a dedicated rock crawler for the channel, but I'm just not in any position to do that. There are channels out there that can afford, 3, 4, 5 vehicles for their channel. And while that is super cool, and I'm very happy for those people, it's just not really realistic for most people. So do you have a crossover? Well, then that's your Overlander. Do you have a little Ranger? Well, that's your Overlander. Do you have an F-150? There's your Overlander. Do you have a Prius? Well, maybe that could be your Overlander. So guys, ask yourself, are you a rock crawler? Or are you somebody that likes to go on an adventure? Either one's perfectly fine. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you like what I'm doing. I'll see you guys in the next video.